Now, guys, up next, we've got to check in with more concerning news developments out in Minnesota, where obviously there's this huge crackdown going on immigration with thousands of ICE and DHS agents being sent by the Trump administration. And to the extent that they're going there to lawfully deport illegal immigrants, I'm okay with that, especially as applied to people who are criminals and who have done harm here or are abusing welfare in various ways or are scammers. I personally do not really support mass deportation for every single person that is here illegally in the country. I would support some form of amnesty for people who came here as children and were brought here by their parents, or for people who've been here for decades and who have worked and never caused any problems. But that's not what Trump campaigned on, and he was elected to deport mass deportation. That means a lot of people, not just the criminals. So fair's fair. I mean, they do get to do that as long as they follow federal law. But we can, of course, push back on the way in which they are doing that. And that's a lot of what's happening right now. And it's hard to verify exactly what is and is not going down on the ground in Minnesota. But this is a pretty stunning development to me, at least. You have local law enforcement, so Minneapolis area police officers and police chiefs, coming out to say that their officers have had off-duty, terrible encounters with ICE agents and even been racially profiled. This is meaningful to me because these are not Democratic politicians. It's not Tim Walz getting up on his soapbox and talking about how horrible it is, because you have to take that with a grain of salt. But these are police chiefs who sure might be liberal-leaning, but they are police chiefs at the end of the day, not political activists. And while this needs to be verified, everything I'm going to show you is just an allegation. But it's an allegation from law enforcement officers on the record, attaching their names and reputations to it, of serious abuses by ICE. And I think that's worth listening to and taking seriously. Here is one of these police chiefs speaking at a press conference published by News Nation. Let's watch.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Ruley, Police Chief of City of Brooklyn Park. Behind me is a bunch of amazing police chiefs that are here in support of a very short but very important message that we want to share with you. What you won't hear from any of us today is rhetoric of abolish ICE or that there shouldn't be immigration enforcement. The truth is, immigration enforcement is necessary for our national security and for local security. But how it's done is extremely important.
I think this is important context to pause on for a moment. These police chiefs are not radical anti-ICE activists. They don't want to abolish ICE. They don't think that enforcing federal immigration law itself is illegitimate, the way that, maybe a Jacob Frey, the mayor there, would. And so you kind of have to take his claims with a million grains of salt because he's coming from a deeply ideological activist position. These guys are not. And what they're about to say did concern me, if true, of course.
In fact, we have a long history of working exceptionally well with our federal partners, including ICE agents. And we have seen the best of them perform their job extremely well in the past. With that said, recently, as the last 2 weeks, we, as law enforcement community, have been receiving endless complaints about civil rights violations in our streets from U.S. citizens. What we're hearing is they're being stopped in traffic stops or on the street with no cause and being forced to demand paperwork to determine if they are here legally. As this went on over the past 2 weeks, we started hearing from our police officers the same complaints as they fell victim to this while off duty. Every one of these individuals is a person of color who has had this happen to them.
So the allegation here is that ICE officers are just going around the Minneapolis area demanding to see people's papers. And just seeing someone without reasonable suspicion that they actually are an illegal immigrant, without any report or tip-off that this is a workplace that has illegal any of the kind of things you traditionally see with immigration enforcement. The allegation here is that that's not present, and they're just going around and demanding to see people's papers. We've actually seen some viral clips. Who knows if there's more context? Who knows the full story here? Of course, I acknowledge that it's complicated and that these are unproven statements, but to the extent that that's happening, that's a problem for me. I don't want to live in a papers, please society. I don't think that we should have to carry around proof of citizenship, or that law enforcement officers who have seen no evidence of wrongdoing and have no reasonable suspicion of you should be able to just demand to see your papers. I think that's a serious violation of people's civil liberties. And if that is happening, especially if it's being targeted to people because of their race or appearance of some kind of ethnicity, that's a serious problem. And I don't know about you, but I find it hard to believe that lifelong non-political law enforcement personnel would put their names and faces attached to such accusations with absolutely no there. It's just a total made-up hoax. I know some people will believe that because they just don't want to believe anything bad about ICE. But what I would say is that we need, like, they should be called before Congress to testify, like these all law enforcement officers under oath about whether this happened. There should be an investigation to see if this is what's happening. And if there is, there should be serious consequences. And this is another reason I do have a problem with ICE officers wearing masks or not having badge numbers or anything by which they could be identified, because how are you supposed to say that, most of the ICE officers are not doing anything bad, but you have a couple people going rogue and, using excessive force or going and stopping someone unfairly or unlawfully? How are you supposed to file a report against a dude in a mask with no badge number, no ID number, no nothing, who doesn't tell you his name? You can't see his face. You can't describe him. That's a problem. How is that not a problem? That's not to say I'm not sympathetic to the horrific threats that ICE agents and their families are facing. That's totally wrong and should be prosecuted. But at the same time, this kind of anonymous policing, yeah, I mean, how do you hold people accountable? How do you protect people's rights? I honestly am not sure how that's acceptable or okay. And I think this needs to be thoroughly investigated. And the actual facts need to be established here. I'm not telling you it's for sure true. Maybe there's an explanation. Maybe ICE denies all wrongdoing. But we actually would need, I think Republicans in Congress should bring these people in to testify under oath and should investigate and subpoena records and information to find out what is and is not going on. Because America is turning against these ICE operations. The public polling on that is pretty clear because of these claims. So if they're happening, it's a real problem. Even if your goal is to enforce immigration law, it's a problem optically and politically for you. And if you care about civil liberties, which I do, it's a problem. And then two, if it's not happening, an investigation would clear that up. So that's my take on that. Let's listen to the rest of his claims that he makes here, this police chief.
To them. In Brooklyn Park, one particular officer that shared her story with me was stopped as she passed ICE going down the roadway. When they boxed her in, they demanded her paperwork, of which she's a U.S. citizen and clearly would not have any paperwork. When she became concerned about the rhetoric and the way she was being treated, she pulled out her phone. In an attempt to record the incident, the phone was knocked out of her hands, prevented her from recording it.
I should just pause on that. You do have a First Amendment right to record law enforcement without them stopping you. Of course, not to interfere and get in their way or get, an inch away from their face with your camera, obviously not. But to record law enforcement is your legal right. And yet I have seen many videos of ICE officers snatching people's phones, knocking them out of their hands, and doing other things that, absent some sort of context, which again needs to be investigated, but a lot of these videos, I'm not sure what context could justify the behavior. Yeah, it's a problem. It's a violation of people's rights. And it's actually good to record law enforcement because those recordings can vindicate them when they're wrongly accused as well. More transparency and more daylight and sunshine into law enforcement operations, to me, is always a good thing, which is why I also think another reform that needs to happen here is a lot of these ICE agents are not wearing body cams. Some are, but I've tried to look into it, and it's like a mix of funding and different infrastructure issues. Whatever it costs, every ICE officer operating inside the United States should have a body cam on when they're engaged in operations. That protects the officer as well as the people being policed. That's my take.
The officer had their guns drawn during this interaction. And after the officer became so concerned, they were forced to identify themselves as a Brooklyn Park police officer in hopes of slowing the incident and de-escalating the incident down. The agents then immediately left after hearing this, making no other comments, no other apologies, just got in their vehicles and left. I wish I could tell you that this was an isolated incident. In fact, many of the chiefs standing behind me have similar incidents with their off-duty officers. This isn't just important because it happened to off-duty police officers, but what it did do is we know that our officers know what the Constitution is, they know what right and wrong is, and they know when people are being targeted, and that's what they were. If it is happening to our officers, it pains me to think how many of our community members are falling victim to this every day.
Listen, like I said, I don't know if everything he's describing is true or not. but I do think that, at least in Minneapolis, some of these ICE operations are going too far, are violating people's civil liberties based on the videos and reporting that we're hearing, and that's not okay. Even if you support the goals of deporting illegal immigrants, even if you agree, as I do, that the obstruction and mobs and trying to interfere is unacceptable and unlawful, and those people can be arrested when they go beyond peaceful protest or just recording law enforcement, you can still acknowledge that we should not have abuses of civil liberties or of people's rights or excessive force happening. And it's hard to measure the scale of it, but it does seem to be happening with these ICE officers in Minneapolis and in Minnesota more broadly. And that's not okay. It's not something you should support or be fine with, no matter what your political inclinations are. I want to touch on another story, which again, DHS denies, the federal government denies. So it's reported, it is alleged, but these lawyers are, not coming out of nowhere to make these accusations. Here is the reporting from, let's see, this is from ABC News. Lawyers allege Department of Homeland Security is denying legal counsel to Minnesota detainees. Detainees are being held at the Whipple Federal Building in Minneapolis. Thousands of people have been arrested during ICE operations in Minneapolis over the past 2 weeks. Multiple attorneys allege that for some of those detained, including at least one U.S. citizen, the Department of Homeland Security is denying their constitutional right to see an attorney. 4 attorneys told ABC News they have been denied access to their clients at Bishop Henry Whipple Federal Building in Minneapolis, where they're being held, which they would say violate Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights to due process and the right to consult with counsel. So we should touch on that for a moment, because some people might be thinking, well, wait a second, if these are illegal immigrants, then they don't have any constitutional rights, or they don't have a right to due process or a right to counsel. That's actually not true. Those rights say persons, not citizens, and have been upheld to apply to everyone in our country, legal or illegal or what have you. And 2, you actually need to double check and make sure they are in fact illegal immigrants. That's why they need access to attorneys who can file appeals if it's necessary or help sort things out. And so this is just a basic matter of fairness and principle that you should support. Even if you want illegals deported en masse, you still got to respect people's human rights. And again, we don't know if this is true. It's reported, it's alleged, they deny it. But if it is, it's unacceptable. And it should be investigated thoroughly, and people should be getting to the bottom of this. So here's more from the story. ICE agents were physically restricting me from seeing them, said one immigration attorney who asked not to be identified. I stood outside the attorney visitation room for about 4 hours on Thursday trying to see one of my clients who had been up there for multiple days. I kept saying, you got to let me see my client, and they just kept repeating, we don't do attorney visitation. Yeah, so that's not okay. It's not optional if you are law enforcement. Of course, again, alleged that this is happening. If it is, that's utterly unacceptable and is a violation of people's basic human and constitutional rights to have an attorney and to have their due process rights respected. Anyway, they told me that because my client had not requested me by name, that I could not see him. The prominent local criminal defense attorney told ABC News, I've been practicing law in Minnesota for almost 20 years, and I have never been denied access to a client. The immigration attorney agreed. We've got blatant constitutional violations, and they're intentional. It's not accidental, but nobody cares, and they're doubling down. In recent months, other attorneys have raised similar claims in cities also grappling with a surge of immigration enforcement under the Trump administration. In September in New York City, a federal judge ordered that DHS provide detainees a way to make confidential calls to their lawyers within 24 hours of being detained at a holding facility. In October, detainees at the ICE facility in Broadview, Illinois, filed a lawsuit claiming they were being held in overcrowded and unsanitary conditions, as well as being denied confidential and efficient access to counsel. So these are serious accusations. They're being made in law enforcement. They're being made by career attorneys who they're anonymous. Their name's not put in the article, but the journalists know who they are, know their names, would have checked out that they are practicing, would have verified this. Now, of course, it's totally important to note that ICE strenuously denies all of this, and I will read you their statement as well in just a sec. The Department of Homeland Security denied that any constitutional violations are taking place at the Whipple Federal Building. In a statement, a spokesperson for DHS denied the attorney's claims, adding that all detainees have opportunities to communicate with their family members and lawyers. The facts are, illegal aliens in detention have access to phones they can use to contact their families and lawyers. Additionally, ICE gives all illegal aliens arrested a court-approved list of free or low-cost attorneys. All detainees receive full due process, the spokesperson said, in part. Now, it's interesting to note that that statement doesn't deny some of the allegations. For example, some of the attorneys have complained that they aren't allowed to speak to their clients confidentially. So just giving them a phone they can call that is monitored or recorded by the feds is not adequate. And some others have complained that they are not allowed to visit their clients in person. And it's interesting to note that the DHS spokesperson there doesn't deny those allegations and is simply saying, well, they can get in touch via phone. We've given them a list of attorneys they can contact. Yeah, I'm not sure that's enough to satisfy their basic due process rights. And you can still deport people while respecting basic human rights. Again, I should say, I don't ultimately know the truth about what's happening at the Whipple building, but I do find these accusations credible and serious, and I think they should be investigated fully because at the end of the day, people's constitutional and civil rights matter. And the idea that, you got to do what must be done is not enough to override these basic principles for me. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet, and do hit the like button while you are at it. And guys, that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk again real soon.